Hello dear listeners, this is second part of story named My Friend Warned Me, but I ignored it until I caught her with her AP. My brutal revenge shattered them, so let's start. Karen burst into tears upon seeing me. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and hugged Karen tightly. Connie handed her son to Peter and joined us. My daughters had grown into lovely ladies, and seeing them together was unforgettable. Good to see you again, Peter, I said, shaking his hand. After introductions, Jody served a huge dinner. Beef shoulder, mashed potatoes, gravy, scones, Yorkshire pudding, string beans, and hot apple pie for dessert. After the kids settled, we started discussing everything. First of all, Art, is it okay if I call you Dad? Peter asked. I nodded. And Dad, the DA believes Jody's ex's car was involved in your lawyer's accident. We're doing a paint comparison with the current owner's car. If it matches, he'll be charged with manslaughter, Peter explained. The fire that destroyed his office the same night was treated as arson. He was seen in the background on video. Since Willa and her attorney sealed the divorce papers, they think there are no documents to prove what happened. They filed a lawsuit against you this week. Jody looked at me and burst into tears. I always thought you were overprotective when you moved me here, but now I see you weren't. I thought your questions to my grandmother were excessive, but now I realize you needed to understand who we were dealing with before making a plan. Willa and Tammy received your lawsuit on Thursday. Josie said, they must have realized I was communicating with you. We feared they'd start tormenting me, so we came here quickly. Grandma, we got your house ready. Jody said, it's furnished, so you just need clothes. I brought most of it in the car, Josie said. Connie will ship the rest, including antiques. I gave her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. It was time to leave paradise. I'll drive back with Peter and Connie and rent a truck to haul everything out, I said. It's time to see if our suspicions are correct. What suspicions? Asked Peter. The lawsuit against me is employed to lure me out, I said. With $2 million in accidental pass-away insurance. It's clear my former attorney's pass-away was a test. Peter, Connie, Karen, and Josie's faces turned white as they realized the truth. They were planning your pass-away, Dad. Connie said, you knew it before you left town. I had a good idea at the time, but even my lawyer didn't believe me. I replied with a broad smile. He experienced firsthand that I was right. Peter excused himself to make important calls. This gave my daughters, my wife, and me time to catch up. Jody found pictures of me from when we first met. Both daughters admitted they wouldn't have recognized me. When Peter returned, everyone fell silent. Willow will be taken into custody after the holiday, Peter said. We can hold her for 48 hours before charging her with 3 counts of theft for stealing annuities from her children. We'll slow down the process so she won't get a bond hearing immediately, Peter explained. Dad, if you can fly it on Wednesday, rent a U-Haul and visit some old places to get noticed. Tell anyone who asks that you're here to pack Josie's things. This way, Willow will have to communicate from jail. The district attorney confirmed your suspicions were right. We'll have police protection for you at Josie's house until everything is resolved. Peter, are you using my children's father as bait to lure out my cousins? Jody asked. What assurance do I have that he won't become a sufferer? I looked at Jody, and she saw my determination. Damn, you'll do it without hesitation, no matter what I think, she said. Jody knew me better than I knew myself. Jody, Art has always been like that. That's why I called him to save you from your ex, Josie said. Art never asks anyone to do what he wouldn't do himself. He wants to rid us of those witches for good. My only fear is Art going back into danger, Jody replied, smiling. If Art were a boxer, he'd be a world title holder, Josie said. He's fast on his feet and can outthink them. Willa and Tammy have no idea he knows anything. Ladies, relax. I'll be in Peter's hands, I said. If anything happens to me, remember he'll have to answer to Connie, my daughter. Peter just nodded, knowing the risks of my return to paradise. Later, while the women were deep in conversation, Peter and I talked. The DA thinks Jody's ex will make his move once he knows you're in town. He'll be furious, knowing you rescued Jody from her terrible marriage, Peter said. Willa will learn you're here from a planted informant in the city jail early Thursday morning. If he's caught in the act, will he spill everything to save himself? I asked. Based on his military background, he's always admitted responsibility when caught. He's a follower, not a leader, so I expect him to give up easily. He sticks with Willa and Tammy because he's easily manipulated, Peter replied. The sign read, "Welcome to City of Refuge, population 34,823. It confirmed that the city council had declared the laws of the United States didn't apply here. It was like the Wild West, with justice depending on what the local authorities decided. Law-abiding citizens were prosecuted, while illegals were ignored, reflecting a skewed version of progressivism. The working class paid for the sins of others to please those in power who wanted lower wages and cheaper labor. Many actions were taken to provide that opportunity, requiring those in power to look the other way. Not much had changed here in almost 7 years. Aside from the freshly paved Main Street, everything looked the same. I decided my first stop should be my old favorite place if it still existed. Thankfully, Bob and Betty's Burger Bar was still around, looking the same but freshly painted. I pulled into the parking lot, got out of the U-Haul truck and headed for the main entrance at 11:15. Just before the weekday lunch crowd. I was counting on being recognized since I was a businessman in a former life. We wanted everyone to know I was back. As I took a seat and picked up my menu, I noticed several people looking at me and using their cell phones. A server brought my coffee and creamer and asked if I was ready to order. Is Wednesday special of meatloaf, baked beans and garlic mashed potatoes available? I asked. How do you know about that? The server inquired. It's for regular customers and not advertised. Tell Jack that Art wants brown gravy and fried onions with the meatloaf, I said. The waitress looked at me like I was crazy. I stood up and said, never mind, I'll tell him myself. I walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen with the server following and shouting my order. Jack turned and looked at me. You dumbass. Jack said with a smirk. You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Susan, bring Art's coffee over here so we can catch up while he eats. Jack, the son of the original owner, never changed the name. We'd been friends most of our lives. We chatted until just before rush hour. He asked a staff member to get his wife to join us, giving us a chance to talk about important things. Art, you should know that after you left, the wife ended her friendship with Willa and Tammy for good. She didn't like what they did or said about you and the kids. Jack, a few things are about to happen. Last night, there was supposed to be an arrest that, if things go right, will trigger several events like a row of dominoes, I explained. Connie's husband Peter works with me. That's why I came back early. Jack looked at me seriously and said, he's a damn good cop and an honest man. He put 2 of our former city council members in jail last year for corruption. You'll have to tell me more later. There are too many big ears here. We saw Sasha pull into the parking lot. She looked good. I sat down and waited for her to come in, knowing she'd see me from behind and not suspect anything was wrong. Jack, what happened? Susan asked. It was important, Sasha said. When she saw me, I stood up and turned to her. Sasha, my little sister, had lost her temper. Her older, meaner brother was home. I hugged her tightly like it was just yesterday. It took her a few minutes to calm down. Jack asked the kitchen staff to leave us alone for a few minutes. Do Mom and Dad know you're back? Sasha asked. No, and it's best if we keep it a secret for a few days. I replied. Are you here because Willa was taken into custody last night? My sister asked. Yes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. I said. Once I settle in, I'll be under police protection. The police are now looking at my former lawyer's passed away with new eyes, believing it's connected to the arson attack on his office. Jack and Sasha's expressions spoke for themselves. It was well known that the district attorney appointed 3 years ago was trying to resolve many unsolved cases. "You're a decoy to draw someone out," Jack said quietly. "If this is correct, the arson, liquidation, and several other crimes will be solved in the next few days," I replied. "This was all done to force me back to the city. Willa's arrest and my sudden return will disrupt a carefully planned conspiracy." "What's behind all this?" Jack asked. "A $2 million insurance policy with double indemnity on accidental pass away," I said, "insured on me." My sister said, as we walked out of the restaurant to my rental truck. We were chatting when we noticed Tammy pulling up beside us. "Where are you staying?" my sister whispered. "At the Grand Dame's house. I'll be moving her stuff to the new house," I said. She wanted to be away from whatever was about to happen. "Josie left town." "Why?" Sasha asked. "She wants to be near her granddaughter and our 2 sons," I answered with a smile. "Jody and I have been together for over 5 years. We have 2 boys who recently turned 3 and 4. My sister was in complete shock. "How did you and Jody end up together?" "Josie and I stayed in touch the whole time," I explained. "When Jody needed help leaving a failed marriage, her grandmother called me. I moved her to my place. We believe her ex caused my lawyer's pass away and the fire at his office." "Do Tammy and Willa know you're aware of what's happening?" asked Sasha. "No, but they'll find out soon enough when they start making their moves," I replied as Tammy approached us. "Art, I need you to drop part of your lawsuit against us," Tammy said. "The district attorney will charge Willa within 48 hours. Unfortunately, my attorney says we can't do that because Willa filed a new divorce petition claiming desertion, abandonment of the child and back child support," I said. "Until the court rules on her claims, everything has to stay as it is." "You can't say that. How will we bail her out with no assets?" Tammy asked. "You have a court order freezing everything?" "Maybe your father could help by putting up his house as collateral," I suggested. "After all, you're both his daughters." Tammy turned and walked away, disappointed. "Willa and Tammy's father has nothing to do with them," Sasha said. "Not since he found out about Seth's true origins. He says they turned out just as bad as their mother." That brought a smile to my face. Finished with that, I got in the U-Haul and drove toward Josie's house, stopping to pick up packing materials. 3 hours later, I was backing into Josie's driveway. Using the large mirror, I parked close to the garage door. Once outside, I locked up before entering the house. I checked to make sure nothing had been touched inside. Josie said she left the curtains open, but they were closed. I texted Peter to ask if he had closed them. He replied that police officers in the house might have done it. Knowing this, I unlocked the front door and went inside. "Mr. Racine," the officer said, holding out a cell phone. "Peter Edwards wants to speak with you." "Hi, Peter," I said. "Looks like those who need to know." "No, Tammy talked to me at the burger place after I finished my lone lunch. She wanted me to lift the lien on her sister's assets and I refused." "I heard that," Peter said. "We taped Willa and Tammy discussing their plans. Jody's ex, Brad Press, came up a lot. Willa told Tammy to let him know that you know where Jody is. That should motivate him to do what we need. Our hunch was right because Brad showed up not an hour later. Willa told him where you were staying. Our informant who was arrested today told her you were back to move Josie," Peter said. When Brad asked where, Willa said to her granddaughter, Jody's house. A few minutes later, I saw the garage door open. Climbing into the van, I pulled out bundles of cardboard boxes and started packing up the house. At 6:30 p.m., the pizza from Papa John's arrived. When the delivery driver knocked, I opened the door. He asked if I was moving. I said no, just helping a friend. Brad made his move around 11 p.m. Using a tire iron, he picked the front door lock and slipped inside. Seeing a light in the kitchen, he headed there, pulling a 9mm pistol from under his shirt. He found me sitting there drinking coffee. "Hey, Art," Brad said. "Willa and Tammy say hi. I'm here to find out where Jody is so I can visit her." "Sorry, but I'd never tell my lawyer's eliminator or the man who burned his office," I replied. "Before you eliminate me, because we both know you will, how much were you promised from the insurance settlement? What makes you think I did it?" he asked, taking the bait. "Because you seem like someone they could manipulate into doing their dirty work. So how much of the $4 million on the accidental pass-away policy did they promise you?" $4 million. They told me it was only $750,000. He said. I laughed and said, "Did you know Seth is actually the son of Tammy's first husband?" His face turned white. "George and I have been manipulated and used by both twins for years. My attorney working on my divorce sued George and Tammy for everything they had." Brad's face went white. "That's why I knew Willa suing me for desertion and back child support was a scam," I said. "The divorce was finalized and just needed her signature. She manipulated me into coming back. That's when I put it all together. You're just another pawn they played. So ask yourself, what are their plans for you? My divorce only delayed their plan to eliminate me. You eliminating my lawyer put their original plan back in motion. I have a chance to set them back for years knowing them as we do. What does your gut tell you? It's hard to watch a fool realize he's expendable once he's no longer needed." "I'm screwed either way," Brad said. "The fact that your lawyer lost control of his car and hit a tree at 70 miles an hour is manslaughter. Manslaughter would get me life. You could get 5 to 10 for manslaughter, but liquidation is life. When I'm dead, they can claim you acted out of rage over Jody and didn't know what you were doing. Did they set you up to be a scapegoat? Most accidental pass-away policies don't cover liquidation. If you were in my shoes, what would you do?" Ask Brad. "You'd make a deal, turn in state's evidence, and hope your cooperation is taken into account. That way you'd get revenge on those planning to take you out." I said. Brad put the weapon on the table and said, "Call the police." I said, "Brad, turn around. They're standing right behind you." Connie watched her husband on the phone wondering what was wrong. Peter had told her that her father was at Josie's. A late call on his cell phone woke them both up. While he was talking, she put the kettle on to make hot chocolate for them. When Peter hung up the phone, he was smiling. "Your father surprised us all tonight. He talked Brad out of it and basically forced him to confess everything. The undercover cops videotaped the whole thing." Connie froze with surprise. "How did my father do that?" "He told Brad some facts he didn't know, like the truth about Seth's origins." Peter said, "I think your father convinced Brad that the insurance policy wouldn't pay out for liquidation. That was the deciding factor. Even I don't know if that's true, but it created enough doubt for Brad to accept the consequences of a lesser offense instead of life without parole. And Josie always said your dad was a quick thinker, but this was unexpected." "What does this mean for my mom and sister?" asked Connie. "If Brad agrees to testify against them in court, they'll both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and at least attempted liquidation of your father," said Peter. Connie picked up her cell phone and called Jody to let her know. They made a plan. Josie would watch the kids for a few days because Jody was going to the airport. Connie would meet her when she got a text with her arrival time. After finishing the call, she explained everything to her sister. By then, Peter had dressed and was heading to the station to get Brad's signed statement. Before the night ended, I didn't wake up until 8 in the morning. The first thing I did was call Jack to get the front door fixed. He said he knew someone, and within half an hour they were there. The door was replaced, new trim, and lock installed. The gentleman was just finishing when my daughter Connie drove up with Jody. Jody jumped out of the car and ran to me, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, I realized how much she had been through. Brad was taken into custody last night. I said, he surrendered to the police protecting me. I was never in any real danger. If that was the case, why didn't you call me? Jody said. Why did I have to hear about it from Connie? It was almost 2 in the morning when the police cleared out, I answered honestly. I figured I'd call you today. I put my arm around my wife and pulled her close. I promise I will never put myself in that kind of danger again. As soon as the repairman finished, we locked the car, put her luggage away, and went to my brother's restaurant to eat. There we were met by Karen, Sasha, and my parents. Jack's staff had to move 2 tables so we could all sit together. Jody was warmly greeted by everyone. Our breakfast when it arrived was excellent. Jack was so excited about what had happened that we ate it all. My parents were thrilled to learn that Jody and I had 2 sons named Carson and Hunter, after both my grandfathers. They looked through all the pictures of our children and us that Jody had saved on her cell phone. My daughters opened up and told them about discovering me with Josie. We were still there when Peter joined us. I noticed he looked tired. Willa and Tammy are in custody now, Peter said. Brad has confessed to everything, including his initial plan to eliminate his father. He'll be charged with arson and manslaughter when he testifies in the witch trials. Tammy and Willa face 3 counts of grand larceny, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit liquidation and fraud. The district attorney is meeting with the divorce judge who handled your father's case to expedite the finalization of your divorce. Peter, are you saying that Art and I can finally get married? Asked Jody, trying to process what she had heard. The DA took the papers to the judge, Peter explained, along with Dad's original divorce papers. He hopes the judge, being fully informed, will waive Willa's signature requirement, the waiting period, and issue the divorce certificate. Jody, I said, I think I'd better buy you a proper engagement ring today, and finally propose. Everyone murmured at my remark. Tears welled up in Jody's eyes. She had always believed we would do it, but this was something she hadn't expected. Before we left, Mom and Dad made us promise to come over for dinner. Jody and I busied ourselves packing until about 5:30, and we headed to my parents' house for dinner. Mom and Dad had a lot of questions. Jody shared how I had saved her from a failed marriage, thanks to her grandmother. Then she talked about getting her first job and where it led. We were still enjoying their company when Peter and Connie arrived with my divorce certificate. It was good to know that I was now free. When Jody had a chance to talk, she bragged about our children and our life together. My mom said, we should have a wedding before you both get back. That's when my father got Peter's attention, grabbing a glass of fresh beer each. We followed him to the den because we couldn't get a word in edgewise. When word got out that Tammy had been arrested, people started calling with more information. Half of the DA staff had to help us. Turns out what we knew was just scratching the surface of what Tammy and Willow were up to. Now it looks like the mayor will go down with them. And what's going to happen to Will's common-law husband? I asked out of curiosity. How involved was he in all of this? He'll probably be disbarred, but he'll be involved in raising their children. Nothing we found links him to the witches, Peter said. Has anyone notified Aunt Josie? Connie asked. Jody's dad wears a size 6.5 ring in case you were wondering. A few minutes later, Peter and I were on our way to the mall where he bought Connie a set of knowing Jody's taste. And I bought a 3-ring engagement set. When we returned, we were pleased to find that they didn't know we had left. I was on the phone with Josie when Karen and her boyfriend showed up. The house was full and we all moved into the living room. The men had to bring chairs from the kitchen. Dad told Jody to sit in his chair. Just let my mom know something was up, so she watched the scene with eagle eyes. There was silence in the room as I walked over and knelt down to ask my common-law spouse to legally become my wife. I caught her off guard, of course. She said, yes, the party went on. My father proudly said, I need to catch up on almost 7 years of drinking with my son and Jody. And Art, your engagement is the best way to start. Peter had to drive Jody and me back to Josie's. A lot of stress and worry were relieved. Friday we went to City Hall to pick up our license. Jody found out she could fit into Connie's wedding dress. Jack agreed to be my best man. Karen became Jody's maid of honor. The DA agreed to perform the ceremony. I had to buy a suit at Macy's. There was no way my future wife was going to let me marry her in blue jeans. On Sunday afternoon in my parents' backyard with the entire family present, we said our vows to everyone's admiration. Even the twins' father was there. We told everyone we didn't want any gifts, but my former father-in-law handed me an envelope. "Colin, this is not a wedding gift. It's your early inheritance," he said with a smile. "The rest of my estate will go to your daughters." I slipped the envelope into my suit and forgot about it for the rest of the day. Everyone videotaped the ceremony and texted it to Aunt Josie. Someone asked where we were going on our honeymoon. Jody's response was, "After everything we've been through, once Grandma gets settled in the new house, our honeymoon will be a week in Florida and a week in California, enjoying Disney with the kids. Because without family, we wouldn't be where we are today." Before we headed home the next day, I handed Jody an envelope. Inside was a bank promissory note for $100,000 with a note. It read, "Thank you for helping to fix karma. I always thought the twins liquidated their mother. I will enjoy watching them get the reward they deserve for their deeds. And so will my granddaughters." Jody put the envelope in her purse without saying anything to anyone. After hugging my daughters and parents, Jody and I climbed into the U-Haul. We drove home finally free of the past. Dear YouTube family, if you like this story, make sure to subscribe our YouTube channel. We will meet you in next one story.